So back to the Concord Commons project here. Now that we have our vertical existing profiles as well as our proposed vertical curves for our roadways here, we want to look at creating an actual corridor or the roadway itself. So I'm going to save this as step 7 just so we can keep our progress from previous steps. And what we want to do first is actually create the assembly. So I'm going to come over here in this empty space, and on the Home tab, go to Assembly, and we're going to create an assembly. And let's call this Primary Road Full Section. The assembly type is going to be an undivided crowned road, and we can accept all the other defaults here. And what we need to do is actually put specify a location for what is actually the control point for this assembly here. So this is going to be the crown of our road. If we click on it, we get different icons up here, and what we need to do is actually bring up the tool palettes for our assemblies. The first thing we want to do is add a lane. So if we go over to the lane tab, the one we're going to be using is this lane super elevation. It's the most general, and it's going to work for this case because we have a very simple case. So I'm going to click on it, and you'll see I have options down here. The side is the right side, so that's the one we're going to work with first here. And all I have to do is click here, and you can see that it's going to be a 12-foot road with a 2% slope away from the crown. I'll hit escape. The next thing I want to add is a curb, so I'll click on the curb tab, and I'm going to use this urban gutter general, and I need to zoom in, and I want to use this as the control point for that curb. And you can see now the roadway has all the different layers, and then the curb has a base layer as well as the concrete section there as well. At this point, I'm going to mirror these assemblies, so I'm going to click on my center line here and go to mirror, and we'll select the road and the curb, hit enter, and then mirror it about our center line. And as we progress here, if you look at the prospector here, we've got primary road full section, we've got a baseline, and then we've got our left and right sections, and they both have a lane and a curb. What we want to do now is actually specify what happens from the curb back to the grade of the ground, and that's under it's under the daylight tab here. And what I want to do is just use a basic daylight general, and we're on the left side, and we're going to click on this point right here. And what this is going to define is a slope starting from this curb. It can either be a fill or a cut, and we can prescribe what slope we want there. I'm just going to use the defaults. Over on the right side, I want to put in a sidewalk just to show how that works. So under the curb tab, I can go to urban sidewalks, and we want to make sure we're on the right side. I'm going to put 1 foot of grass inside and another foot of grass on the outside. And I'm going to use this back of curb point here. So there's my foot of grass, there's my sidewalk, and there's my foot of grass. If we want, we can click on this and go to subassembly properties, and if we wanted to, we could change the slope. I'm just going to make it 1% to show that we can change it. So instead of being 2%, it's 1%, and you'll notice a slight difference in that particular sidewalk. I'm going to add a daylight for the cut and fill on the right hand side here. And again, I'm just going to use the general. So that's the end of our assembly. The next step is to add the corridor. So we're going to do this on Cabernet Court here. So we go to the Home tab, click on Corridor, and in order to create the corridor, we have to have 3 things. We need the horizontal alignment, we need the vertical profile, and we need an assembly, and we've already got all those things. So corridor, we'll call this Cabernet Court. It's based off an alignment and a profile, so the alignment is Cabernet Court, and we want to use the proposed version of the profile. The assembly is the primary road full section, and then the target is what we're going to be daylighting to, which is going to be the existing grade surface that we have. And we want to leave this set baseline and region parameters because we're going to modify this corridor just a little bit. So these are the baseline and region parameters here, and the one we want to modify is just the ending station for this region. So we can click on this particular icon and zoom in over here, and I'm just going to end it at station 8, and I'll hit OK, and we'll have to rebuild the corridor here. We've got a few errors, but we'll address that here in just a minute. So the reason I stopped it short here is because eventually you're going to want to generate some intersection, and we can always come back and extend this up to wherever the intersection starts. So the error I was getting is because my roadway is actually starting to veer outside of the existing surface that we've specified, and we can take care of that by just removing the boundary on our surface and using the full surface definition. So if you remember, we put a boundary on our existing grade surface. So if we go to definitions, boundaries, we can click on this outer boundary and just hit delete, or right click and delete. And then we'll have to rebuild our surface, and that gets a little bit bigger. And then if we go to our corridor and we rebuild our corridor, it should hopefully fix that error. And now you can see it found a solution for the cut fill at this very last station, which is station 0. That's actually all we need to do to create the corridor. If we look, we can see our lane and our curb and our sidewalk. This is probably more easily visualized in 3 dimensions. So what we want to look at is the object viewer now. So if we click on our corridor and then we right click and go to object viewer, this allows us to look at 3-dimensional features. I'm going to go to what is the basics here, just to shade it with gray, and then we can use our scroll wheel and our mouse to move this around. I'm going to click on top just so it allows me to pivot a little bit easier. Oops. And we can get a view now of our roadway here. So here you can see the roadway, here's the curb, and then here is the daylighting. On the right side we've got a curb, and then we've got grass, a sidewalk, grass, and a daylight as well. If we turn it to the realistic, you actually can get a little better view. Of what we have going on here. So you can see the roadway, the curbs, the grass, the sidewalk, and if we zoom out and we kind of pan around, everything looks pretty good. You can see we've got the vertical profile here. If we look at the top view, you can see our horizontal alignment, and at this point I'm happy with the work, so we'll save this again and we'll end our tutorial at this point.